Welcome back to Mind Your Biz. My name is Seth, and in today's episode, I'm straying a little bit from the typical creator highlight and from the typical crypto builder highlight. This is something that's very near and dear to me because I know that many people in the cryptocurrency, blockchain, and really just frankly, the entrepreneurship space are not very clear on their options as to where they can form their corporate entity. And this makes literally a world of difference depending on where in the world you choose to form your corporation, whether it's an LLC or an LLC with the DAO rider, as we've seen in states like Wyoming. So it was a great pleasure to have a member of the Catawba Digital Economic Zone reach out and ask if they could present what they offer in this space on Mind Your Biz. And today I have Natalie Metza-Garcia joining me. Natalie, welcome to Mind Your Biz.
Hi, Seth. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for making time. Members of my audience may not be familiar with the Catawba Digital Economic Zone, and they certainly wouldn't be familiar with you yet. So tell us in a nutshell, who is Natalie Metza-Garcia?
I am the COO of a project of a subjurisdiction in an Native American reservation in the US that will revolutionize the digital assets and banking space in the US this decade.
Awesome. And let's go a little bit back to a little bit of your background and how you got started down this path. I'm fascinated by this. As you may not know this, but I personally traveled to Estonia not long ago, have spoken to their Ministry of Finance and spoken to their e-residency program officials. They're a very accessible organization. And I get the sense that with this Indian reservation, that you found a great level of access as well. So I'm genuinely fascinated by this. I've been fascinated by the jurisdictional differences as to where you might form a corporation, how that might impact your tax liability as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, but especially in the digital asset space. So who was Natalie before working here? I'm trying to get a sense for who you are so I can get a sense for how you were drawn to this and how you're contributing now with your passion. But who was Natalie before all of this?
Perfect. So Natalie, before working at the Catawba Digital Economic Zone, was working in the special jurisdictions space and in projects that use some form of jurisdictional arbitrage, like Estonia, to attract entrepreneurs or businesses and sometimes residents. I actually did my PhD on the intersection of projects that entail special jurisdiction frameworks so that they have special regulatory frameworks, blockchain, and indigenous communities. And that is how I came to play the part that I play today in the Catawba Digital Economic Zone because of my previous knowledge and background of how you really have to engage and deal with so many types of stakeholders when trying to create a new jurisdiction. And my emphasis has always been you have to create systems that benefit first and foremost the local communities. And that's something that we are doing here. And it's definitely one of the reasons why the project, like I said in the introduction, is going to transform the digital assets space and banking space in the US, because it is an exercise of sovereignty by the Catawba Indian nation in creating a whole regulatory framework to regulate the activities of non-Catawba members in their territory.
Amazing. That's amazing. So a little tidbit, I'll share a little bit of something personal. Before getting into this space for a short time, I worked for a GSA contractor and my specialty was I called literally, I might be the only person in cryptocurrency who's aside from, I'm getting the sense maybe you, who's called over the phone every single BIA office in the United States and Alaska.
Yeah. So, interesting.
Yeah. So I've got something of a sense for what it's like to speak to different offices of different sovereign nations. Not, of course, just the BIA offices, which are not the sovereign nations themselves. But
for those who are listening, it's Bureau of Indian Affairs.
It's a little bit out of date, the name, right? But it works, right? The office that I worked for, the GSA contractor that I worked for was partially Indian owned. And so I said, okay, have you called every BIA office? Maybe we should try to get some deals flowing there.
Yeah.
That was my bright idea. But yeah, just an interesting coincidence there. So I've got some sense for how it's very different, the Bureau of Indian Affairs offices, and then of course the sovereign nations themselves, and of course those sovereign nations that might have some really strong capital interests and industry built in, and then the stark contrast of those nations that don't, right? Those reservations and nations that don't. And so when I caught wind of what you're doing, I was immediately fascinated because I think that crypto can solve a lot of problems in that space. So let's talk more. I'm talking too much actually. For you, what was the point of no return with your background in that space of jurisdictional arbitrage? What drew you into this, and what was the point where you found, okay, my passion is meeting an opportunity here, and this is really going to go somewhere? What was that moment like for you?
I like to work on things that can make people's lives better, right? And one aspect that is ubiquitous to improving people's lives, whether we like it or not, is governance. And yes, elections and representative democracy and all that is important, but the governance that I think is the one that is most impactful in people's lives is actually local governance, because that is the one that touches you the closest. That is the one that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. There's been many examples since the 80s where small policies that are tried first on a local scale are so successful that countries then decide to implement them widely on a national level. But they were created first on a small scale without having to modify the whole regulations of a country. Knowing that you could have small test beds or sandboxes for regulations and test them out on a small scale without having to deal with, like I said, changing processes at the level of a whole country with millions and millions of people, was my point of no return, because I saw that if we wanted to make the world better through its governance systems, we could start from the bottom up through special jurisdictions, through small governance systems that were implemented already on a local scale, like special economic zones are.
Okay, amazing. So basically, it sounds like you've taken, a lot of us just say it to say it. The whole think global, act local. Here you are taking radical action, massive action at a
Yes,
local level.
definitely, yes. But it is local, but it is also global at the same time. It's global because currently the Catawba Digital Economic Zone, like Estonia, like Estonia, allows people from almost anywhere in the world to incorporate a legal entity. It can be an LLC or a DAO LLC. So you don't really need to physically be there in the Catawba reservation to have your LLC with CDEZ, with the CDEZ.
Okay, amazing. Let's talk about that a little bit. I'm going to pull up the website right now as we discuss some of a little bit more in detail about this.
Okay.
But as far as, oh, that's not quite right. There we go. So as far as you mentioned, I think the most apt comparison, as you mentioned, is probably the Estonia e-residency program, where you don't have to physically live there for, say, like in Puerto Rico, where it's 1 day out of the year that you have to physically be there, or Dubai, where I think also the residency requirements are fairly strict. You have to physically be there for a certain number of days out of the year. With the Catawba e-resident or digital economic zone, it sounds like you can form your corporate entity there without physically visiting any place. You can do this from anywhere, almost anywhere in the world, you say?
Exactly. Yeah, almost anywhere in the world. And you don't really need to be there. The whole process can take from 15 minutes. The whole process online, your part can take maximum 15 minutes. It gets approved in about 24 hours. So it's really fast.
Wow. Okay, that's far faster turnaround than I've heard from, say, a competing e-residency program, where it's
Exactly.
weeks, or if there are complications, maybe months.
Exactly. And also, we compare ourselves with Delaware a lot because Delaware has the biggest company incorporation market in the whole US, but they still do a lot of things. Sometimes you have to fax documents or mail them in person. We are digital first. So, very sustainable, all nothing, no printing like that. And I like that you mentioned the Estonia e residence program because It was one of the e-resident. It was the first and the one that popularized a lot the jurisdictional arbitrage topic. However, unlike Estonia, an advantage that we have is that we are a jurisdiction created specifically for emerging technologies, for digital assets. So we have created a regulatory framework that is favorable to the growth of these industries while being fully compliant with US regulations. So we innovate on the edges. We take centuries of work by legal monks in a way, and we improve on the edges. And we have passed regulations that are, if not one of the best or the best in what they do in the US, specifically in regards to digital assets and banking and financial services and DAOs.
Amazing. Okay, so it sounds so now that we have something of an apples to apples comparison, as you mentioned, you early mover in the DAO LLC. If I'm not mistaken, I think that they were the first to offer the DAO. It was technically an add-on, a rider to the LLC that they offered, but then it precluded having anonymity with the DAO because they needed to know provenance of funds and have a person who represented the LLC. How was some of this structured in Catawba to maybe mirror best practices from other states? Was there inspiration gathered from Delaware and Wyoming? And if so, what was some of the biggest inspiration?
Yes. So each of our regulations have been inspired on different states. For example, for the digital assets regulation, we do took a lot from Wyoming, but we did things that they don't. For example, we define what NFTs are. So NFTs are considered as intangible property that you own. For the DAO regulation, we took inspiration also from Wyoming, and we have a DAO LLC model, but we also took inspiration from the venture capital firm A16C, and the work that their attorneys have done to propose the legal structure called unincorporated nonprofit associations.
Right. That's the Unincorporated Nonprofit Association. If I'm not mistaken, the Unincorporated Nonprofit Association is not the 503, the 501c3. It's a very different designation. And
Exactly.
I have a ministry that keeps on emailing me about this. So I should know the actual chapter and verse pretty well by now. But there is a paper trail, right, in terms of regulation.
Yes, it is not the 501c3 like the traditional nonprofit. It is more informal, and in that way it resembles more what DAOs want, right? And the way DAOs operate in the digital world. So the way we are going to manage that is going to be, and this is a cool announcement that I have, is through a deed, a digital ID. Right now, people can set up their own DAO LLCs, and in the coming months, before the end of the year, they're going to be able to also create DAO LLCs by letting the zone authority, which is the entity in charge of the zone, know that they have formed this DAO UNA, unincorporated nonprofit association, and then the only requisite would be for the member of the DAO to have a deed with CDEZ. And that is a way that we found to keep the privacy of the user, but also ensure that the user passes KYC. So we wouldn't hold that information.
Amazing. Okay, so with the digital ID, are there specific partners that are currently proctoring the information gathering for KYC? And you mentioned that the digital economic zone itself is not holding this information the way that, say, an anonymous LLC might in Nevada or Wyoming, where they would hold that information and only with a court order release it. This is different.
So let's say that you create let's say that throughout your whole life you have created 5 bank accounts and you have 1 car registered. All this information, governments have access to it, right? There's databases that have that information. Yeah, in a way it works like you're saying. Your identity gets verified by all those touching points that verify who you are.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So all of the, I don't know So shout out to Tony Bravado and Diamond Doll, who really pushed to make sure this interview happened.
Yes,
They may not know. They're in UCLA right now, and
yes,
honestly, I'm a little bit gutted that I didn't go to speak because I know they had some slots there, but maybe next time.
yeah. I talked to Diamond yesterday. She's fantastic.
And what a power couple, amazing. The
Yeah,
two of them together also, both thoroughly impressive on their own and together. Wow.
exactly.
But they may not know I'm something of a privacy advocate, and as you mentioned, all of these little pieces of data, they form a sort of a breadcrumb trail, right? Digital breadcrumb trail back to the owners of different corporate entities. Every new piece of information that you give, every new KYC event winds up becoming part of a digital information brokerage, if you will.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I'm sure this has happened to many of your listeners. It's happened to me. The paper trail or the breadcrumb trail is such that sometimes when you have to answer those 5 questions that sometimes you are asked to verify your identity, sometimes I have addresses there that come from 20 years ago. The it's there. You can't, yeah,
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. No, it seems like a properly architected digital ID with so-called zero knowledge proofs or privacy safeguards in place.
exactly.
It does make a lot more sense. I was resistant to it at first because I thought, okay, the nature of digital information is such that once you've digitized it, very hard to contain it, extremely difficult to contain digital information. But the best shot we have is, like you're saying, probably a well-architected digital ID. So
Exactly.
with the Catawba Digital Economic Zone, the digital ID partner, are they a public entity? Are they currently creating their offering? Is this something that's in development internally? What does that look like?
I can't say.
Okay, fair enough.
I
All right, so the privacy starts here. I can't learn anymore.
Stay tuned. Yeah.
Got it. So this is in development right now. Natalie, put me on NDA. When the cameras are not rolling, put me under NDA. I need to know. I need to know soon. The curiosity is killing me. I almost can't wait. Or if I can be involved as a consultant on some level, I would love to give input. If there's an opening for comment, maybe that time is not quite yet, but would love to give comment and feedback when that does happen, because it's tricky, right? This is probably one of the hardest parts, I think, is well architected digital ID. There have been other attempts that have not done so well, and just like failed attempts at AI or bad attempts at AI, the results can be devastating for some people if it's not contained correctly. So I'm very eager to learn more about that when the time comes.
Perfect. I'm glad.
Yeah. So that's what it looks like right now. In terms of the site itself, you mentioned that there were a couple of options in terms of corporate formation. What are you finding are some of the most popular options?
Right now, on the platform, we allow the formation of LLCs and DAO LLCs only. We have been asked a lot about DAO UNAs, obviously, C Corps, and nonprofits. Although we can create more, these are, yeah, those there
Okay.
are the top. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. Based on my understanding, which is quite limited actually, it seems like the DAO UNA would be far preferable to a traditional nonprofit.
For a DAO. For a DAO,
Yeah.
yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
For
would.
a more traditional type of nonprofit with the traditional structure and the board, maybe, and that survives on external donations as opposed to work of the members, or yeah, it
Mhm.
might be the traditional nonprofit model might be more.
Okay. So the DAO UNA might not be a good option if you are reliant on, as you mentioned, traditional donations.
It is, but for example, if let's say you are my grandma and you have a small a house where you take care of dogs and cats, that's a traditional nonprofit. She doesn't really need to be a DAO UNA. The DAO UNA was created precisely for people like you who care about privacy, who live online pretty much, and who know where the world is heading in terms of interconnections and our interactions, and want to structure their way of interacting from a yeah, in their world in a way that makes sense for them.
Okay, got it. So just more flexible in terms of the provenance of funding then for the organization, not strictly donations and not strictly like you mentioned, services or work for hire or any other products that might be made by the nonprofit and then sold,
It's
but a mix.
It also works for the world in which we live, where many people create organizations without really knowing the 1,500 million members or 1,500 members of a DAO or 1 million member of a DAO. It's really difficult to have a traditional corporate structure with that many people involved. So you really have to delegate your operations and your organization through, maybe at least partially, through a smart contract. It's for people in that world, not for the traditional person who needs a nonprofit.
Got it. Okay. So but the UNA aspect of what's being offered here by way of nonprofits, is that what the request is for? Is not for the 501c3, but for the alternative?
Yeah,
Nonprofit?
it's not a 501c3.
Right. No, of course, of course. Well, I guess what I'm asking is, you mentioned earlier that there's been a request or been the question, could you offer nonprofit formation? And so it would be more along the lines of the UNA. And it's so bad. You've said it like 5 times and I'm forgetting the actual spelling, the actual acronym. UNA is just so much easier to deal with because I've already forgotten the actual designation, right? It's not 501c3.
Unincorporated nonprofit association.
Amazing. Yeah. So unincorporated, which, I mean, it almost sounds okay. So you're playing fast and loose with the rules, right? You don't register anything. You don't declare anything. That can't be totally accurate, right? What?
You are not accurate, exactly. It is, you do have to let the zone authority, which in this case is the government body, you have to inform them that you exist. So you do have to fill out some information, but you don't go through the traditional process that you go through when you create a traditional nonprofit. And the regulation text that actually that served as the basis for our regulation is something that it was created by the same, I called them legal monks earlier, I shouldn't. So let me explain first how our regulations are created to get to the point that it is not that you have to be less compliant. Okay. So although the CDEZ is a new regulation, our regulatory body, our enabling act that you can find on the website, is based on laws that have already existed for a while and that many states already implement. So many regulations, commercial regulations specifically in the US, are created by the ULC, right? And they create template laws and then they put them out and say, hey, states, here's this law, for example, I'm just going to use an example, on tort or digital assets. And then states take those template laws, modify them according to the regulations of each state. Also, many special interests get put inside in those process too. And then each state enacts their own regulation based on the template laws of the ULC, the American Bar Association also. So that is where our baseline commercial code and regulatory body comes from. That is where our base UNA mode, UNA draft comes from, right? So it's not something that we invented just to allow people to be more flexible and less compliant and not having to follow regulations. Not at all. It is standard, just not very used, and also not used until now in the context of digital assets or DAOs.
Sure. Yeah. This is the mailing list that I subscribed to because the initial concept was intriguing, right? Creating a nonprofit that was different anyhow from a 501c3. And the mailing list that I joined, it was primarily geared towards religious ministries of all types, right? So spiritual and religious ministries. Things like these, I don't know if you've heard of them, but like the psychedelic churches, where maybe it's somebody who understands plant medicine from the Amazon, but it's illegal here in the United States. And they wind up getting special exemptions. So it's a very unique thing, but it might also be a sort of run-of-the-mill Christian or other pastor who just wants to form their own organization, have their own parish. And so they think, I could do a nonprofit, but apparently this other designation has become much more popular in these circles of small, independent spiritual leaders and ministers.
Interesting.
But yeah, I hadn't considered how would I make something like that work for digital assets. So it's very, I'm very delighted to learn that the Catawba Digital Economic Zone is breaking new ground here, pioneering something new here.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to, if there's any attorneys or someone in who is listening to wants to dive deep into the regulation, we have it on the website. But we also have easy to understand sections on the website that take the regulations and break them down. Okay, this is our banking and financial services code. This is what you can do. This is what you cannot do. These are the states that from where we took the inspiration. And yeah, everything is there explained pretty much.
Amazing. So I'll have links to this in the description of the video. Anybody who's watched so far, of course, the links are, it's free to click the link. So why wouldn't you do that? Go check it out right now, and go verify for yourself. That's our mantra in crypto, right? Verify, don't trust. Exactly. Verify everything that Natalie has just said. I'm sure you'll find, like I just did, it's all right there. So that's amazing. The documentation looks very thorough too, and I can't wait to read more on my own. I did, just as a content creator, I wanted to wait until we spoke about this together, so you as my subject matter expert could guide me. But I'm looking forward to doing a deeper dive. So audience, join me. We're gonna read more. We're gonna become educated, and we will decide whether or not this is the right choice for us and our businesses. But Natalie, I'm curious, as far as there being some big wins with the Catawba Digital Economic Zone, you've been promoting and building internally for some time now. What would you consider some of the biggest wins for CDEZ?
The biggest wins? Like the biggest achievements?
Achievements, yes.
Okay. This is also a cool announcement. About 2 months ago, maybe 3 now, we passed our own banking and financial services code, which allows us to charter banks. And the zone authority, the entity that is in charge of governing the zone, is a full Catawba entity, 100%. They are currently selecting the banking commissioners. Once that banking commission is set up in a few weeks, not that long, okay, then we're going to be able to start receiving bank charter applications.
Amazing. I'm sure that with such a focus on digital assets, you'll have an early interest list built very quickly.
Yes.
If you don't already, I'm sure people already asking, okay, when can I do this?
We do.
Yeah, amazing. That is absolutely amazing. Seriously, congratulations. I'm excited to have so many people in this industry who, as you already know, you've measured the pain of the industry, right? So many people who've looked at other jurisdictions to potentially, have their bank chartered. So this is huge. What are the ramifications for somebody who would like to pursue this? This means they can have their physical nexus of business operations almost anywhere. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, great. But still have the bank chartered in the Catawba Digital Economic Zone.
Exactly. That being said, our goal, and people can see it there on the website, we can, basically the banks can be either virtual or physical. We do want to have banks with physical branches in the reservation.
Okay, got it. And just to be very explicit, we haven't said it out loud yet, but it's right here on the About page. Clearly, the Catawba Indian Nation is physically located in South
Carolina
and North Carolina. Okay, and so I saw the 2 pins, but then I saw that, clearly it's recognized in South Carolina. Is it not federally recognized in North Carolina, just informally?
It is the only federally recognized tribe of South Carolina, but in North Carolina, there's other tribes. So it's not the only one. And something really interesting is that the Catawba can actually, being the original owners of land in what is now known as South and North Carolina, they have a special agreement with the federal government, and they can buy land back. They can buy the whole South Carolina back and the bottom third of North Carolina.
Wow.
So they can expand their jurisdiction, their reservation.
Amazing. So this may lead in the future to speculative opportunities for outside investment?
This is a current opportunity for outside investment. Yeah, we're currently fundraising.
Amazing. That's awesome. Okay, Natalie, you've blown my mind in this interview. This is a lot more than I bargained for. That's awesome. Okay. So you mentioned big milestones or achievements that have been unlocked. The banking charter is phenomenal, and I can't wait to hear more news about that, knowing that this is a current investment opportunity right now for anybody who may want to, in the future, move their interests in their banking interests to this area, that there may be a speculative opportunity right now in terms of the land buyback, the repurchase. This is huge. This is amazing. What has been the reception so far, and who are you seeing the most interest from to date?
We're seeing the most interest from people who see the value in the digital assets, Web3, and emerging tech industries, and who see the value in having a government that provides clear regulations, good regulations for this new and growing industry. Because we are all familiar with cases like FTX and how bad they made the industry seem, even if what was happening behind the scenes was fraud, plain and simple. It could happen in the making mugs industry or whatever. But yeah, so this is definitely a need that we have been told was needed, because there is, given that this is such a new industry, in many cases there are no regulations, or regulations are unclear. So in the case of future, if you have your company, your digital assets company incorporated in Delaware, for example, and Delaware doesn't have regulations for digital assets, the ruling might be very up to.
Yeah, case law. It's funny. This is me as a non-attorney, just already knowing because of my tenure in digital assets. Case law, it wins the day, right? Anywhere you can go that has case law for anything that you want to do, like you mentioned, you have that clarity, not just from the regulations, but also where it matters if you ever have to go to court. So that's definitely very helpful.
And here it is a mixture of case law, but also we take elements of civil law. It is also, this is what the regulation says. This is what a digital asset is. This is what an NFT is.
Yeah, and that initial clarity also makes a lot of sense. I think there are some people who might say, in terms of the regulatory clarity and certainty and rigor, that is, as painful as it is to be totally above board and to obey every possible regulation and make sure that your business interest is above board, that New York is one place to go. BNY Mellon still, it stands out as a big interest in the digital asset space, a larger banking entity that's apparently done everything correctly. What are the prospects for the Catawba Digital Economic Zone, and then now potentially the burgeoning physical areas associated with the tribe?
Love that you're mentioning New York, because the zone is actually 30 minutes away from Charlotte, and Charlotte is the place where the banking industry in the US was born. And it is today the second biggest banking capital in the US. So we do expect to get some of those spillover effects from Charlotte, but also help modernize a bit, or contribute to the digital transition of the traditional banking industry that currently sits in Charlotte. So I do expect really interesting synergies between the two.
Amazing. That, and hopefully healthy competition between New York and this area. BNY Mellon it's lovely, but can't put all your eggs in one basket, can you? We saw what happened with Silicon Valley Bank, and as you mentioned, other things that just happened that where on the face of it, it looks like there's compliance, but there may be fraud. It seems like diversifying is helpful. So knowing that this could be a potential competitor in that space in the not too distant future is huge. Also, I'm betraying my ignorance here. I wasn't aware that Charlotte was such a key geographical area in banking in the United States. So you're giving me more homework to do, Natalie. I've got more to read up on after
America was born here.
Yeah. What was now?
Bank of America was born here.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah. Wow.
And now there's big companies relocating to Charlotte. For example, Amir Price is moving to Charlotte. I know that precisely in the south of Charlotte, in Ballantyne, so Charlotte, Catawba, in the middle. Here in the middle, this is where Charlotte is growing the most, the fastest, and the nicest also. And there's a lot of tech companies that have fled Silicon Valley and that are moving their headquarters here to Valentine, or at least have big offices, including Credit Karma, and there's a bunch of them.
Amazing. This is great. All phenomenal news, and congratulations on so far the success that the Catawba Digital Economic Zone has achieved. Looking forward to hearing more big announcements of achievements that have been unlocked in the near future. I should ask, are there any upcoming big dates? You already mentioned some things that are in the works that may be developed soon. Anything you haven't mentioned that you can talk about publicly that's exciting for the Economic Zone?
Those are the two biggest announcements that we're focusing on right now in October. But I'm going to throw back something to you. Maybe you want to share with your audience what we talked earlier. Right now, we have a 25% discount code for anybody who wants to set up a CDEZ LLC. And if when you are creating your company, you put in the payment section MYB, then you are going to get that 25% off.
Yeah, awesome. If only I could spell this on the fly a little bit better. There we go. That makes more sense. Use the code MYB. Yeah, use the code MYB when you do go to the website and you do decide to start on this journey right here, or if you don't have an account, begin the sign-up process, go through all the steps. If you feel so inclined, this is not necessarily an endorsement, and I'm certainly not telling you how to run your finances or your business. But if you're curious and you'd like to learn more, by all means, yeah, use that code. And just as Natalie said, that will entitle you to a discount. So you'll hit the ground running and you'll do less expensively. So why not? Why not? Check it out.
Why not?
Yeah. But appreciate your time. And I need to ask one last thing. Where are the best places for the audience to contact either you or just members of the team? Are you active on socials? In other words, where do you want people to go? What do you want them to do when they get there? Aside from using the code MYB.
They can find us on Discord. If they go to a website and go down, they're going to see there all the socials that we have. And we are on Discord. We're one of the few governments that have a Discord presence, if not the only one. And yeah, that's it. They can reach out to the admins very easily and they can identify us because we have the logo. So we're very approachable. Any questions, we're always here to answer them.
Amazing. Okay. And just for very, yeah. Again, it's right there. It's in the link. All these links that have been pointed out by Natalie are in the description of the video. So costs you nothing to click them, costs you nothing to join the community and ask those questions. So why wouldn't you do that? I know you're curious, audience. So go and satisfy your curiosity, get those questions answered, make sure that you're making the right decision if you do go down this path so that when you use the code MYB, it's the right decision for your business. Natalie, thank you so much for carving out time for the Mind Your Biz community. This has been an absolute pleasure. You've opened my eyes multiple times in this interview, in this chat. So expect to see a bunch of little snippets from this all over Twitter and maybe TikTok and stuff. Gonna be excited about releasing some of that. So appreciate you again.
No, thank you, Seth.
Yeah. Audience, until next time, remember to stay private and mind your biz.